Okay, thanks, Danielle. This is Peter talking. Really appreciate the invitation to do this, and it came at a time of fairly difficult time for us when the president's budget basically included what's called an orderly phase out of the Marine Mammal Commission. Just to update you on that, that's still in the president's budget. Congress, obviously the House and Senate have met in their committees, and at the moment, both the House and Senate marks have us at full funding. So we're hoping that it's not over yet, but we're hoping that that will hold. Sorry, I'm trying to make it advance. Let's see. Not exactly sure, but anyway, I also want to note, I think Vicki Cornish is on the call on the phone. She's our energy advisor. And I'd also note that Sue Moore, who's often on these calls, I'm not sure if she's on today, is,
yep, I'm here.
Vicki's here. And Sue Moore is one of our committee of scientific advisors. So I hope she's around, but she may be at sea as well. We're getting some static. I hope that's not from me, but basically the Marine Mammal Commission was established as an independent federal agency in the 1970s. At the time, the Marine Mammal Protection Act of 1972 was authorized by Congress. We serve as an oversight agency over domestic and international policies and federal actions related to marine mammals and their habitats. And many of you, we've worked with many of you, worked with lots of BOEM folks on Arctic oil and gas stuff. We worked with the science community. And what I'd like to do is give you kind of an overview of what we do nationally and globally, and then move into the Arctic stuff, if I can make this thing advance. There we go. So who we are, we consist of 3 commissioners who are appointed by the president. Our chair is Daryl Boness, who was formerly of the Smithsonian Institution. And then our other 2 commissioners are Dr. Francis Gulland from the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito, who's a marine mammal veterinarian, and Mike Tillman, who many of you may know from his time as a high mucky-to-muck at National Marine Fisheries Service for many, many years. We also have a committee of scientific advisors and 9 scientific advisors who are intermingled in there with the staff in the picture below. They're also appointed on the basis of their expertise on marine mammals and chaired by Dr. Randy Reeves. And I'd also point out that this photograph, we never have humor in these calls, but I sort of learned from this photograph that if you're going to have, you have your hair parted on the left, make sure if your picture is being taken in a full gale that the wind isn't coming from the right. So kind of a bad picture, but Vicki insisted on putting it in there. So we have 12 to 14 staff, depending on how we're doing at a particular time. I've already talked about our current budget. Our budget over the last several years has been about $3 million, a little bit over $3 million. As with everybody else, pretty much static over that time. And we're hoping that it remains static into the next year. That would be for us a victory. In addition to using that money, which mostly goes to staff because we're small, we have a small grant and research support program, which has been around for many, many years and funds projects in the US. We fund international projects, really nowadays to the tune of somewhere between $20,000 and $100,000, with 100 being very high at the moment. Used to have a bit more money than we have now. But some examples of particular focal areas for different fiscal years have been Arctic species. We provided some money for Cook Inlet beluga whale feeding studies in the last fiscal year. We've done help with next generation sequencing for ring seals, figuring out ring seal population structure. Those are just a couple of the examples. Also, like basically analyzing passive acoustic monitoring data from the Bering Sea to look for right whale calls. We have a good website. It was just redone about 18 months ago. It has a lot of good species information, topical information. It also includes our letters to the agencies. Several of you have probably been victims of those letters, which comment in detail on federal actions or scientific permits or what are called incidental harassment authorizations for takes of whales or marine mammals during activities. So I'm going to keep moving. We have a lot of activities. This just sort of gives you a snapshot of things we think about, from swimming with manatees to feeding dolphins, which is illegal, to entanglement of large whales, to oil and gas, to ship strikes, particularly of right whales. And then on the bottom right, that kind of represents looking at scientific research. We operate under a 2015 to 2019 strategic plan, and it has 5 objectives, which give you a sense of our overall priorities. First is offshore energy. Vicki came on as our energy advisor, specially created position right out. Actually, she came on the weekend of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill and went straight down to the Gulf, never showed up in the office for another 3 weeks. And that's been a big focus of ours, is assessing the impacts of the Deepwater Horizon spill on marine mammals and looking at, the reparations, the whole legal and scientific follow-on to that event. We've also been heavily engaged in evaluating exploration and development proposals in the Bering and Beaufort and Chukchi Seas. International, I came from the State Department and the International Office of the Fish and Wildlife Service, and we get engaged both on multilateral organizations like the International Whaling Commission, the little bit on the Arctic Council I'll talk about in a moment, the Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Living Marine Resources. Our former science director was instrumental in developing that agreement and the ecosystem-based approach it takes. But we also get involved in very specific issues like freshwater dolphin conservation in Asia, in South America, conservation of the Akita, a little porpoise in the Gulf of California, which I'll mention in a moment. Health and Strandings with Francis Gulland as our commissioner. We have a really strong interest in following stranding events. Right now we're following the death of 10 or more North Atlantic right whales in the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada. An episode of really extreme concern for that population, trying to determine. We sent a veterinarian up there from North Carolina to help with necropsies of those animals to determine exactly what happened. We follow these types of unusual mortality events like the ice seal and walrus unusual mortality event, what's called the Arctic UME, that began in 2011. So we try to support the folks in Alaska who are trying to investigate that event. And we're also, I'll kind of get into it, it's too bad, I hope Sue's on the phone, but we're leading the development of what's called Marine Mammal Health Map, which is a web-based program to basically map marine mammal health and status and provide an interactive platform for use by managers, the public, to understand marine mammal health and also relate that to human health. Fishery activities are probably the greatest source of mortality to marine mammals around the world. And so we have work on bycatch and entanglement that is ongoing both at the domestic level through take reduction teams established under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and also through following like regional fisheries management organizations, and then very specific work like on the Akita Porpoise, which is being caught in gill nets, which are used to catch an illegal fish, the totuaba, which is then the swim bladders are sold to Mexico. It's a very complicated situation, but almost, I mean, the extinction of the vaquita is really a real possibility. Just checking, you all can hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the Arctic. The Arctic has been a focus of the Commission since our coming into being. I think in the 70s, when the commission was established, the issue of Alaska Eskimo whaling was front and center. There were huge scientific questions, huge political questions related to that. And while those have, in many cases, been resolved and smoothed out, there's still a real focus on the Arctic, on the Aboriginal, the Arctic Alaska whaling and use of marine mammals in subsistence, and as well as now, concern over changing conditions as a result of warming, and also, greater industrial and vessel use of the Arctic. So we've been there a long time, and in general, we have basic oversight responsibilities, which is reviewing proposed activities, what are going to be the incidental takes of marine mammals in activities like seismic surveys, proposed drilling. At a broader scale, we review proposed lease sales, the 5-year program plans like the Outer Continental Shelf program plan for the United States. We review scientific research permits and Endangered Species Act proposed listings, and once listed critical habitat designations. And I note that those ESA listings are really have been at the forefront of the question of how do we look at the foreseeable future relative to changes in the Arctic. So when the polar bear listing came up, there was an analysis of, where's it going to be in 100 years? What's the situation going to be at the end of the century? And a lot of discussion of just how far one could reach out in considering those as threats to marine mammals. So an example of a couple things, here's a map that we included. Vicki did great work on this, working with some other organizations to identify sensitive areas that might be excluded from the lease sale in the Chukchi Sea. We did another corresponding one for the Beaufort Sea. But we also comment routinely on the Arctic marine mammal disaster response guidelines, and I said support a lot of research. Internationally, and Sue gets a lot of credit here for really being a leader in developing international biodiversity monitoring in the Arctic. The Commission hosted a workshop in 2007, which set out a framework for Arctic marine mammal monitoring. And that's worked through the CAF committee of the Arctic Council. And their latest product is the State of the Arctic Marine Biodiversity Report, or the SAMBR report, which is kind of interesting. I mentioned the International Whaling Commission. Sue and I work together with Robert Soydom, a bunch of other colleagues, just on scientific issues that correspond with the Arctic, which come to the Scientific Committee of the Whaling Commission. So in 2016, we deviated from our normal routine, which is to have an annual meeting somewhere in the United States. And so instead of going to Anchorage or to Hawaii somewhere, to New England, we said we're going to go up to the local communities and hold listening sessions to basically ask the locals up in the Arctic part of Alaska, what are you seeing with respect to marine mammals and with respect to your subsistence hunts and the availability of marine mammals for subsistence use? So we went to Barrow, Kotzebue, Nome, and Anchorage, and sat down in each place for an afternoon or a day, just to hear people out. We got a lot of common themes. I'll run through them fairly quick. I think we're all aware that climate change and its impacts are affecting the hunting of marine mammals. Ice is going out earlier, currents are different, weather's different. It's impacting the safety of hunters. It's impacting how easy it is to find marine mammals for subsistence hunting, and basically a great concern. We also got the message of communication isn't as great as it should be between Washington and the Alaska Native communities. There are specific concerns about what do these ESA listings mean in terms of subsistence hunting, and how's it going to impact whether we can exercise our subsistence rights. We heard about that Arctic UME, the unusual mortality event. and their concerns about those injured or those sick seals and how that affected their availability to eat, increasing ship traffic, and long-standing concern about how is traditional or indigenous knowledge factored into decision making more at the higher national level. But just to run through a couple things, polar bears are a species of great interest around the Arctic and to Arctic communities. At that particular time, there was a concern about the US-Russia bilateral agreement and some of the provisions under it, one being for harvest limits, which were agreed under the bilateral agreement, but weren't particularly socialized that well with the community. So there's a lot of concern about limiting and parsing out takes of polar bears among the communities. And that was paired up with another concern about what is the exact boundary between the southern Beaufort and the Chukchi Sea population. So we kind of took the messages we received back to the Fish and Wildlife Service, consulted more with the back with the groups, and then that actually ended up into a kind of polar bear summit and a lot of action on the Alaska Nanook Commission, and also a delay of those provisions that people were so concerned about. Another focal area we heard about was communications, and for ourselves, we came back and we developed our own communications plan, which basically lists month to month, what are upcoming meetings, what are opportunities we can take advantage of to help in this communication problem. And one of the things we've done a couple of years now was to bring folks from Alaska down to the Capitol Hill Oceans Week sessions in Washington for specific sessions like this one on local voices and traditional knowledge for a sustainable Arctic economy. And along with those, we organized briefings with congressional representatives and other kind of public events just to get more word out more places. A bigger area, long-term area, is just this question of co-management. The Marine Mammal Protection Act provides for cooperative agreements between Alaska Native organizations and the federal agencies. And there are bodies such as the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission, the Alaska Nanook Commission, which manages polar bears, the Alaska Beluga Whale Committee, the Ice Seal Committee. These are co-management groups set up to basically monitor and keep track of the harvest and issues related to it. That's under the umbrella of the Indigenous Peoples Council for Marine Mammals, or IPCOM. We've been involved thinking about this. It's not been an easy process, and probably before 2008, we were working on it, but in 2008, we did a specific review of co-management, identified recommendations for improving it. And then in 2016, we again learned that there's still concerns. There's not enough funding, there's not enough capacity in these Alaska Native organizations, and maybe inadequate engagement in the federal side and on the community side to really meet the goals. So as a result of that, we actually proposed a proposal to the North Pacific Research Board, which thankfully was accepted, which I won't go into the details. Vicki can talk more about it, but basically is designed to work to go into the communities and set up a kind of consultative process to, again, identify what people think co-management is, what are the impediments to good working relationships and effectiveness of these in managing the subsistence harvest, what are people's self-evaluation of what's going on, and what recommendations can we make. So we're really excited to start that. I think it starts in the new year. So now you guys have been going on for a long time, but I think just to get to one of the purposes of this and really invite discussion, the IARPC, what are they called? They're called the Research Goals and Objectives, sorry. As the IARPC 2017 to 21 plan was under development, we engaged on that, read all the drafts and thought for ourselves about where we fit into these objectives. And I'll list a couple of them here. I think you get a sense that we are really interested in the basic life history of Arctic marine species. We may provide specific funding for some of these goals, like I don't know if we've given to identifying walrus prey, but we can play in terms of our grant program on things like this. And we're really interested in the effectiveness of the different agencies and working together to understand Arctic species. In fact, we're working on a comment letter today on the OCS 5-year plan. And this is one of, it goes back to comments we've made repeatedly about really getting the data we need, getting the understanding of marine resources to inform that kind of offshore development and assess its impacts. Again, increasing the knowledge of Arctic marine species. I mentioned our work on the Circumpolar Biodiversity Marine CBMP, I can't remember what P is, anyway, on the monitoring program, Circumpolar Biodiversity Monitoring Program. We've been in that. I'm part of the Marine Mammal Experts Network in that process. Sam Simmons in our science program works on global observing networks a great deal. And in the course of that, it's like, how do we integrate observing networks across different regions, geographies? So that's relative to Ambon. And I guess more specifically, we were really interested in providing funds for the sail drone mission. For last year, when they first set out with that, we helped give some seed money on that. And now we're really excited. I guess it's up there. 2 of them are up there if it's going well. One on the transects up on the DB03, and one maybe further north. I'm not sure where they are. Maybe someone can report on that in the meeting. And I'd also mention, I meant to mention this before, I mean, we're part of these processes with Guillermo on the development of the MARIs, the whole concept of what should MARIs be, what should the RFP look like, and helped in evaluating that program. Unfortunately, we kind of run out of money a lot faster than some of the other agencies when it gets to putting in large chunks of change. We don't have that much money, so sometimes we drop out at the crucial point, but that doesn't mean we aren't intellectually very interested and ready to contribute. Then we also thought it was really important to say that we're part of the coastal resilience objective. This connection with subsistence hunts, the connection of marine mammals and their habitats with the coast, and the impacts on marine mammals, both for their own health and for human health, are really fundamental and central to our work. So we signed up for 8.21 to understand trends, processes, and abiotic feedback loops affecting distribution and abundance and ecology of coastal species in relation to food security. Note that some of these changes have led to food security crises on some of the islands in the Bering Sea and St. Lawrence Island. They've experienced food shortages because of the inability to get to the marine mammal species they depend on. And if Sue has gotten on, she can explain better, but she and Francis Gulland, our commissioner, wrote a great paper on marine mammal health and the marine environment. And this goes back to this health map project. We have obviously oceanographic conditions, ecosystem processes. Changes in those are affecting the body condition, the health of marine mammals. And so they're, as you can see, one of the great Sue-Moore diagrams, there are great connections with the environment to marine mammal health. There's also a connection out to the right of this between marine mammal health and human health, expressed directly through the subsistence activities, but also really reflective. You don't have to be in Alaska to see connections between marine mammal health and human health, like the presence of harmful algal blooms off California is significant, not only to marine mammals, but to human health. eating crabs, for example, doesn't happen when you have a significant event off the coast of California. So I think this marine mammal health map, and I encourage you to go on our website and read about it, is a really interesting program to connect all of these elements across, not only in the Arctic, but across marine mammals and across the world. I think, yep, that's it. We actually didn't put it in. We have a slide just to go back to the first theme, which has a big penny right in the middle of this whale tail, which that penny represents how much we cost the average, I think it might be the average voter, it might be the average US citizen a year to carry out our work. So we're kind of proud of what we do, and I'd welcome any questions or discussion. And also welcome Vicki piping up if there's anything she wants to say.
Peter, this is Danielle. Thank you very much. That was a really wonderful presentation. It was a great, concise overview with just the right level of detail about what you're doing in the Arctic. So thank you very much. Vicki, are you on the line? Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not sure whether you can hear me.
Hi,
Danielle.
I just unmuted you.
We hear you.
Okay, thank you, Danielle. Okay, I'm on a microphone, so I'm not sure how long if I'm talking too loud. But yeah, I think Peter gave a really nice overview of that project that we're starting up in January that was funded by the NPRB. We're really excited about it. It's kind of a different focus for us, being looking at the cultural aspects of subsistence and what co-management means to the communities of Alaska. And so it'll be a lot of time, intensive time spent in the communities, either ourselves directly or with students or others in the community that are asking folks what co-management means to them. We'll have a steering committee set up for input on the questions that are asked, and also on the review of this really important issue of what does co-management mean? What is the definition of co-management? So Jenna Malik, our former Sea Grant Fellow, is the lead. I'm the co-lead. She's going to be located in Anchorage for the year, and I'll be coming up for a study session. So I'm really excited to get that going. Thanks.
Thanks, Vicki. This is Danielle. I think many of you are probably not aware that I started my career with the Alaska Native Harbor Seal Commission as a co-management organization. So I'm really excited to see that our board decided to fund this project. And I think it's a really nice example of the type of work that the Marine Mammal Commission is engaged in that highlights the importance of having a separate organization like the commission to do that work, where it wouldn't necessarily be appropriate for the other federal agencies that are engaged in co-management to take this on. If the Marine Mammal Commission was defunded, I think there's a lot of work that the commission does that it wouldn't necessarily be natural for other agencies to pick up and address in the same way. And I think this is a good example of that. And if Peter and Vicki, if you would like to highlight some other examples of that, we'd love to hear about them. And otherwise, I'll see if anyone else on the line has any questions for Peter or Vicki.
Yeah, just quickly, I'd jump in and say, in general, one of the things people come to us for is for advice on what experts they might recruit to help, talk about a problem, or to help do a peer review of some activity or some grant program. So again, we're sort of seen as a neutral place to find some help for that kind of stuff.
This is Guillermo. I have a question, Danielle. Peter and Vicki, thank you so much for your input and presentation. Peter, you mentioned that there is inadequate capacity for co-management in the local communities. Can you specifically say what's needed to give a step forward?
Well, I'll let our study help us answer that, and I'll let Vicki answer it. But I think basically the capacity among small communities to staff and basically participate in a number of different, sort of top-down government mandated activities is something that's brought up a lot. There are many, many meetings, many, many organizations, and relatively small group of people who do their best to participate in those. So again, I don't think we can change that actual fact, but are there ways to somehow modify the consultation processes or the way they operate to take some of that pressure off? Obviously, the question of resources is always raised. Do the co-management organizations have enough money in their basic funding? And I think the basic funding situation has changed with the elimination of earmarks, with actual, changes in actual Alaska representation that might have paid more attention to the co-management organizations in the past. Those have both affected their functioning. I don't know, Vicki?
Yeah, Peter, thank you. I think that that covers the basic components. The capacity issues are first and foremost, as well as funding. And this ability to participate in not only the research that's being done, but also in the decisions that are affecting local communities is a big concern for folks that we talk to. And I think that teasing out this difference between defining co-management and teasing out its difference from the decision-making process, I think is really important. What the communities consider as their role in co-management, and how do they how is the information that they provide in decision-making. They want to see that. They want more of a capacity to be able to contribute to the collection of information that's being used, and then they also see how it's being used in decision-making. So it goes a little bit even beyond the concept of co-management as it was initially envisioned, as just a participation in research and a role in study design and areas like that. So I think the concept of co-management is changing, and we need to listen to the communities and say, what does it mean to you? And does that go beyond what the statute intended? Can we reconcile this in any way? Is it come down to capacity issues and just funding, or are there trust issues also that figure into the effective co-management relationship? Just exactly what are the factors that are hindering those co-management relationships from being effective as initially envisioned by the crafters of Section 3?
Thank you, Vicki.
So this is Danielle. I know the chair of the Indigenous Peoples Council on Marine Mammals, IPCOM, Mike Miller, was planning to join us, but I don't see him on the webinar feed. I'm not sure if maybe he's calling in from a line that doesn't show up here. But Mike, are you on the line? I thought he might have something to contribute to the conversation, but it sounds like he wasn't able to join us. And someone else from Alaska who deals quite a lot with marine mammal issues on a local level is Gay Sheffield. She's the University of Alaska Sea Grant Marine Advisory Program agent. And she was also planning to join us today to add to the discussion. I don't see her on the webinar either. Gay, are you on the line?
Yeah, I'm on the line, but I joined late. We have a lot of activity in Nome right now with a lot of NOAA research vessels and such. So we're running a little ragged, but it's good, all good. So
thanks for
glad to join.
us. Did you have anything to add?
I came in right when someone was talking about co-management. You guys are So I'm late to the show here, but if you have a question for me specifically, go ahead.
Well, I guess I'd just say thanks many years later to Gay, who coordinated our listening sessions in Nome. This is Peter Gay. We had really interesting sessions. Gay helped us arrange to bring people in from outlying communities to participate in those sessions. And I think I'd say the Alaska listening sessions were really such an educational experience for folks who generally aren't in Alaska. That experience of knowing that people had to come in from outlying communities and also getting to visit some outlying communities was really important to us. And kind of, again, made us commit to getting more people up, not just to Anchorage, not just to Fairbanks, but out to the communities as often as we could. That communications plan we developed is one tool to do that. I think having Jenna come be in Anchorage will really help in the course of this study. But it's still hard and we still aren't up there enough, but we're aware of that now, and also can convey that to our friends in other agencies who also struggle with this all the time and do amazing things to get out to the communities.
So Peter, this is Gay. Can I make a comment?
You bet.
So, and I apologize, I don't know how many people are on this, and I know I'm a late joiner, but some of the things that are from a rural Alaskan perspective that may be useful in your talking. I heard co-management, I hear listening sessions, I hear future, work, and trying to integrate in with in my case, the Bering Strait region. So a couple things. One is that we find out here that federal agencies and organizations that try to integrate with our regional communication networks. So each region along northern and western Alaska is very, very different. The way the communications are, the way the governmental systems are set up. For example, the North Slope Borough and the Northwest Arctic Borough are kind of overarching governmental systems. And then there's the Bering Strait region, which doesn't have a borough, and we're very independent. The communications out here, I think it's very, it's always interesting that people come out here and say, well, how do I get in touch, or do you know this is happening? And we kind of think out here, well, we're always talking amongst the regions along the coast. We have lots of gossip and news of the day and unusual events. And if agencies that are trying to come in are able to understand that the local or regional communication networks, it's much more effective. I think the agencies are much more effective regarding response situations and messaging. I don't know if that's helpful. And then another one is in people's perspectives is that often the lack of scientific data within a region does not mean there's a lack of regional knowledge. So because the science hasn't been there to document certain things, doesn't mean that there isn't a incredible regional knowledge with the communities and the members that live out here. So I guess those are two main points.
Definitely appreciate that, Gay. And as I said, being with you and your colleagues out there in Nome really gave us a great appreciation of that, which we obviously can't fulfill and live up to every moment, but I hope we'll keep trying.
Well, I think you all made a difference by coming.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
And Gabe, this is Vicki Cornish. I'm also on this call. We were talking about a proposal that was funded by the Research Board that we're going to be initiating in January. And I was a little bit hesitant with announcing this on this call because we haven't really done a rollout. We just recently got word that the project was approved. So like any good project, we hope to roll out an announcement of the project so that we can engage the communities effectively. So, so this is kind of a first heads up about the project, but we are going to be reaching out to each of the regions and all of the communities about the project in the next month or so. We just recently met with a congressional delegation to let them know about it, but we haven't officially kind of made an announcement. So so it's not that anybody has missed anything. We just haven't. This is kind of a first announcement of the project getting underway, and we will be sharing more details about the project with the communities in the next month, in the coming months.
Hi, Vicki. Thanks. I'll be interested to hear. That's interesting.
Does anyone else on the line have a question or a comment?
I should actually, Peter here, I should just mention, I actually omitted mentioning Robert Soydum as one of our scientific advisors, who's also becoming the chair of the scientific committee of the International Whaling Commission. So anyway, we work very closely with Robert. And I was really remiss in not mentioning that before.